For more on these latest developments, we have joining us Dr. Bong Young-shik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you with us.
Pleased to be here.
So let's start from the start of these news that happened over the weekend, with the White House confirming that they had agreed to hold a second summit with Kim Jong-un. Now, this, of course, comes after President Trump met with the senior North Korean official Kim Yong-chol, who also met with Pompeo in Washington. Now, those talks seem to have gone very smoothly. What was your reaction to this announcement?
I think both sides has reached the same conclusion that this is a time for implementation of what was agreed in Singapore summit meeting last June. Time for implementation would dictate both sides to make some kind of compromises to meet at least part of the demands issued by the other side. For the United States, it is giving some kind of measures that will satisfy North Korea's demand for building trust and ending hostile relations since the Korean War. And for North Korea, it is to meet the demand by Trump administration of the United States that the United States national security has been under direct and grave threats of North Korea's nuclear warheads and intercontinental ballistic missiles. So although complete implementation of the Singapore summit meeting agreement may not be far-fetched still, but there might be some middle grounds that will be forged in the second summit meeting between the two leaders within a month.
So Kim Yong-chol, the senior North Korean official, met with Trump and Pompeo. But what we got out of the weekend was actually not that much. We just heard that they have agreed to hold a summit at the end of February, but no other details really about what they discussed. Do you think that was pretty much all they agreed upon, the date for this next summit? Or do you think they would have made some progress towards some sort of concession from either side?
I think they have made a substantial and important progresses, judging from the fact that Stephen Biegun, a special representative for North Korea, representing the Trump administration, and his team are now in Stockholm, in Sweden, to have conversation with their counterparts from North Korea. And not only that, but also South Korean nuclear envoy, represented by Ambassador Lee Do-hoon, is also present in Stockholm. That means that not only both sides are in agreement about the second summit meeting's venue and time, but they are undergoing very serious and focused discussion on what kind of agendas would be discussed and will be on the table in the second summit meeting between the two leaders. So this is a positive sign, I believe.
Before we go on to that talks that are happening in Sweden at the moment, so Trump said the location of the summit has been decided and will be announced soon. But yet, why do you think he's holding back on this announcement? What do you think has not been agreed between the two sides yet?
Well, as I said, that unlike the first summit meeting, which is the first ever summit meeting between top leaders of North Korea and the United States, two adversaries since the Korean War, which was symbolic as in of itself. This time, the second summit meeting has to produce substantial progress to meet the expectations for domestic audiences and allies. So that explains why President Trump has been rather reticent in making any related announcements about the second summit meeting, because a lot of things are still being discussed at the working levels in Stockholm.
But all the reports at the moment are saying that it's going to be in Vietnam, and everyone's working under that assumption. I mean, what do you think it is about this location, perhaps, that they've not decided yet?
Well, it is all about maximizing the dramatic effect for President Trump. So he is very astute about choosing the right time and right frame to make important announcements to his benefits. So I don't think that the delaying of any additional announcements or his silence are attributed to lack of progress, but I think the reverse is close to the reality, that since a lot of important progresses are being made, President Trump is just waiting for his time to make big announcement to dramatize the effect.
We'll have to see whether it is in Vietnam after all, or if there's another surprise that comes out of the hat. Well, let's move on to these talks that are happening in Sweden. As we said, the U.S. Special Representative on North Korea, Stephen Biegun, has met finally for the first time his North Korean counterpart, Choi Sun-hee, who's North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister. And they've been holed up in this retreat in Stockholm for about a couple of days now, hashing out details, we guess, for this coming up summit. What do you think they're discussing, and what are the signs so far about the progress that's being made?
Well, it must be anybody's guess, but I believe that, judging from the announcement by the State Department, that this is time for implementation. Time for implementation means that both sides has to produce some substantial concessions to meet at least part of other side's demands. Then what will constitute acceptable concessions for North Korea and the United States and South Korea in that regard? For United States, it is a fulfillment of Trump administration's America First policy. The concern is that the United States may be willing to make small deal with North Korea, meaning that it would agree to take correspondent measures in exchange for North Korea's agreement to make concessions on its intercontinental ballistic missile, like Hwasong number 14 and 15, that can deliver nuclear warhead to territory of the United States. But North Korea may be allowed to just freeze its nuclear programs and materials rather than eliminating them. There is a concern for South Korea and Japan because, well, without North Korea achieving the capability to miniaturize its nuclear warhead, so that nuclear warheads can be topped on the ballistic missiles that can attack the United States, or acquire the technologies to make the nuclear warheads and missiles resistance to the high heat that it has to endure when it comes back to atmosphere to attack the United States. North Korea, as of now, is already capable of mounting nuclear warheads on Nodong missiles, short-range missiles that can attack South Korea and Japan, countries that are already within the reach. So even if North Korea may agree to destroy long-range missiles that can reach the United States, that concessions will still leave South Korea and Japan, United States allies in Asia, vulnerable to nuclear attacks by North Korea. So it may be acceptable deal for the United States for its own national security. It is not a full and meaningful denuclearization of North Korea for South Korea and Japan. So if Trump administration is going to make this kind of agreement with North Korea, that is a fulfillment of America First policy, which may send its Asian allies dry and cold down the river.
That's, as you mentioned, so North Korea, we understand, there was a report in the New York Times which said Washington and Pyongyang had discussed freezing North Korea's nuclear weapons production. I mean, but then can you argue that it could be just a first step towards a greater goal towards denuclearization, or is there a risk that this is just where it will end? Regarding that as a positive first step is a very optimistic analysis. We have taken this road before in the name of early harvest approach. We exploded the cooling tower at Yongbyon, believing that taking this small first step will lead to building momentum, building mutual trust, eventually leading to full and verified denuclearization of North Korea. But what actually happened is allow North Korea more time and space to sophisticate its intercontinental ballistic missile technology and nuclear tests. We may be in danger of repeating the same history. That this may not be positive first step, but first step that would allow North Korea to get off the hook once again. Now there is a concern because as long as North Korea maintains the nuclear materials, know-hows, scientists, then North Korea can easily top those nuclear warheads on short-range missiles to keep
South Korea, Japan as hostages. So the ultimate goal for verifiable and full denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula for all countries involved is eliminating not only missiles, the delivery systems, but also nuclear warhead and the knowledge and the materials inside North Korea. But Trump administration may be in rush to show the result that its policy toward North Korea has been successful.
Perhaps the most intriguing factor in the talks that are taking place in Stockholm at the moment is the fact that South Korea's nuclear envoy, Lee Do-hun, has been invited as well to talk to the two sides. How unusual is this, and what do you think this suggests?
North Korea's biggest prize is to get out of economic sanctions. But the United States has been really adamant that as long as North Korea will not take steps toward final and fully verified denuclearization, economic sanctions would remain in place. But South Korean government has been advocating North Korea's argument that North Korea needs to get more incentives to pursue economic prosperity as opposed to nuclear weapons. So South Korea needs to be on board. If the United States is making any concessions, they will lift at least part of existing economic sanctions on North Korea in exchange for North Korea agreeing to dismantle its delivery system to the United States. South Korean government has been arguing that it is important to build mutual trust and reduce the military tension on the Korean Peninsula. So North Korea's security concern against the United States will be relieved, which will incentivize North Korean leadership further to pursue economic development, not focus on developing nuclear warheads and missiles. So in that regard, South Korea will not have a big opposition to United States make concessions on North Korea, economic sanctions on North Korea.
Perhaps on that point of economic sanctions relief, perhaps one of the first steps that could take place is the easing of sanctions on the Mount Kumgangsan tour projects and the Kaesong industrial complex. There's been a suggestion that that's the reason why Lee Do-hun is in Sweden to discuss these factors and possibly even working towards an end-of-war agreement and a peace treaty agreement of some kind in the future. What do you think of those possibilities?
Well, it is possible. All agendas may be on the table to be discussed. And Kim Jong-un, in his New Year's message on first day of this year, said that the armistice agreements must be replaced by a multilateral peace regime to put an official end to the Korean War. I'd like to leave this question to the viewers of this program. I don't know whether North Korean leadership will be incentivized toward economic development, or it will just let North Korean leadership off the hook. If United States, South Korea, and other countries will agree to lift at least part of economic sanctions and agree on a lot of measures that will reduce military tensions, including replacing armistice agreement with a peace treaty. Some people argue that they will encourage North Korean leadership to pursue economic prosperity because North Korean leadership will not have to worry about aggressions from South Korea and the United States. Others argues that it will just leave North Korean leadership off the hook because without pressure of economic sanctions and strong alliance between United States and Asian allies, North Korea does not need to give up its nuclear weapons and missiles. We will see which argument will prove true.
You're giving viewers a little bit of something to think about as we end this program. I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you for coming in today and sharing us your thoughts.
Thank you.